Thank you, Colin. That was great.
Good job, Colin. Yay.
So that took a little longer than what I had planned on, but that's great. Did everybody get a pie? Something sweet in front of them, other than their spouse. Good? Okay. We're going to put, if there's any that aren't sold, we'll put them over here and we'll auction them later. Okay? Okay. Amanda, are you ready, dear? So, Amanda does this thing, if you've seen it on Facebook, seems like every time I open Facebook lately, I see her picture on there, and it's great. But she does this thing called Bid on Beef. And, you know, Julie and I have gotten this thing, and you saw just a sample of it called Bid on Pie. The trouble is, we've got some diabetics, and we've got, you know, overweight people, so it's kind of a dangerous thing. Beef is a lot better for you, right? So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Amanda. She's kind of a pioneer when it comes to property rights, and I will let her speak on her own behalf, but she's brought some great Patriot friends with her that are going to say a few words also. So with that, without further ado, I will give you the microphone and get this out of your way.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right.
Well, what a great evening. You know, I don't know how you guys feel, but I can tell there's a lot of optimism in the room tonight. It's a great day to be a Republican in South Dakota, is it not? 4 years ago, a bad actor and a bully came into the state of South Dakota. That bad actor decided they thought they could come onto our land and force their way where they were not welcome. For 3 years, South Dakota landowners have shown up at the state capitol asking our legislators for 3 things. Number 1, to protect our God-given, constitutionally protected private property rights. Number 2, maintain local control because government is best close to home by community members who actually live there. And number 3, absolutely no eminent domain for carbon pipelines. This year we got it done. We got it done. Can the legislators who are part of that please stand up so we can recognize them? These are servant leaders who did walk the walk, talk the talk, and got it done for the people of South Dakota. Thank you so much. You know, this story goes back quite a ways, and I guess I got involved in it really kind of by accident. A little bit about me. I'm really nobody. I'm a farmer and rancher, a mother of 4, and the Lord has blessed me with some opportunities to speak across the country and around the world, trying to share the stories of the people who are not represented, who are not addressed by our politicians, who are not really thought of, the untold stories of the people who keep this nation free and fed. I've spoken in front of the United Nations, I've spoken Washington, D.C., and really from coast to coast, focusing on agricultural policy and how it impacts farmers and ranchers, how it keeps farmers and ranchers on the land doing what they do best, which is being stewards of the land, stewards of the livestock, and ultimately stewards of the people that they aim to serve. But all of the work that I've done across the country never could have prepared me for this carbon pipeline coming into my backyard. And I first got involved in this and heard about it when an elderly widow named Rita Brown gave me a call. Rita was contacted by this pipeline company, and they wanted her to sign an easement. And Rita was not interested in signing that easement. And when she said, I'm not interested, they said, you sign this easement now, or we'll go through on your land and we'll put it wherever we want, no matter what you say. Rita was on the phone with me for 2 hours crying and saying, can you please use your platform to help tell the story of what's going on in South Dakota? And at that time, I was just starting to hear about this company. I didn't really know what was going on. It was confusing because there were some ag associations that somehow were telling me this was a good deal when it clearly looked like a Green New Deal. And so I'm trying to information gather, and then it was an avalanche of phone calls. It was landowners, 5th, 6th generation landowners, people who have been on the land since before statehood began, and they're all saying the same thing. This out-of-state, foreign-backed, privately owned company is coming into the state of South Dakota, and they want to do the craziest thing. They want to bury plant food, the fundamental building block of life. How ridiculous is that? And so I realized I had to get off the fence and I had to get involved. And so really quite interesting, and I have very special guests here tonight to help me tell this story because I knew I couldn't come West River with this message without having these guests with me. But I met a guy named Mark Lapka, who is a farmer, rancher. Yes, please give him a round of applause. Mark, we did a podcast together, and he told me the story of what was going on and that this was happening right there at home in McPherson County. And this landowner movement began with just a couple farmers getting together, making phone calls, getting organized, talking to each other, many times talking to each other after they haven't talked for many, many years, and coming together and spreading the word. And so since that first meeting with some of these great folks, a lot of things have happened. And I'm here tonight because not only have we been in a battle against a carbon sequestration pipeline, actually a couple, but it has started something so big, so powerful, so moving that we are just getting started. And tonight I want to celebrate some of the victories. I want to talk to you guys about some of the lessons that we've learned along the way, because the reality is what happened in eastern South Dakota is coming here. The tentacles are already here. The encroachment on your private property rights, whether it's your land, your livestock, your backyard, your home, they want to tax you to death and they want to take what they feel entitled to. And those are the two biggest problems facing the state of South Dakota. And I'm here to say to the establishment that wants to continue down that path, the days are done. It is done. Your time is up. So I gotta say, as we fought this fight, and I had never even testified on a bill before. I speak across the country, I don't get nervous. I was nervous showing up in Pierre and testifying on these bills. My hands were shaking, my voice was shaking as you're looking at a committee of politicians who would roll out the red carpet for the lobbyists and look at the landowners and the South Dakota citizens who were there in their own time and their own dime, and they would look at you with absolute disdain and disgust. Like, why are you even here? You're not important. Why are you wearing plaid shirts and blue jeans here? Don't you know there's decorum? How ridiculous was that? And they would hear the pleas and the cries of the South Dakota citizens, and one by one, they would kill every single private property rights bill that we ever brought forward, one after the other, while the lobbyists cheered and gleamed at us like, look at what we can do here. We've got control. Something happened, though. They pushed the South Dakota citizens a little too far. And when they pushed us, something bigger even happened. SB 201 came along, and that bill was the most disgusting, egregious abuse of power that would have rubber-stamped this project, taken away local control, and given it all to the state to come down and press the heavy hand of government down on we, the people. Let's not forget that this company sued 160 landowners, multiple counties, and even a PUC member. And they thought, well, we've got the legislators too, and we're going to rig the game in our favor. And to add insult to injury, after they crammed A through M amendments onto this ugly, awful bill, SB 201, they had the audacity to put lipstick on a pig and call SB 201 the Landowner Bill of Rights. Are you kidding me? Let's not forget, yes, he was definitely, that cowhand was definitely a part of that. I don't know about cowhands.
have ranchers out here.
Yeah, we have ranchers. I'm a rancher, I'm not a cowhand. Okay, I can tell. So they called it this Landowner Bill of Rights. And it was a wild thing because I saw in Pierre this attitude that our land, our livelihoods, our traditions, our family businesses were up for sale to the highest bidder. And it did not matter that these were God-given inherent rights for our ability to own the land under our feet. And yet they sold us down the river, they called it a Landowner Bill of Rights, and they told us it was good for us. The South Dakota people said, not so fast. And so SB 201 came along, and there's many, many fighters in this room who were a part of that effort. It was named RL 21, and it was put on the ballot. That story is a story that the entire nation is watching. Because in 90 short days, we were required to get 17,500 signatures. In 90 days, 37,000 signatures were collected and dropped off in Pierre. Yes. That's not to mention that there were no paid circulators. This was 500, Jim? 500 unpaid volunteers on their own time, on their own dime, from every county in the state of South Dakota, gathering, doing the work, and making sure we could get this on the ballot. Then the primary election happened, and we kicked out 13 of those politicians who voted for SB 201. Retired, go home. And we replaced them with true servant leaders, constitutionalists who believe in actually conserving. So no longer are South Dakota citizens going to buy the mailers that say, I'm a common sense conservative and believe it's true. Now the South Dakota citizens are waking up, paying attention to the voter records and saying, actually, you're not who you say you are. And just because you put an R behind your name to get elected does not mean you are a Republican. And then the election happened. And I got to tell you that RL 21 effort spanned across the state. Jim and Mark and Karla and so many of us went town to town spreading the word. City after city, having these little meetings in churches and bars and in barns and wherever, gymnasiums, wherever we could go to tell the story that we're protecting private property rights, we're maintaining local control, and we cannot let this rubber-stamped bill get and be a law in the state of South Dakota. And I'm so proud to say that when election time came, 65 of 66 counties with 59% of the vote voted our way, and we defeated RL 21. We effectively told those politicians, not on our watch. That's not going to happen here in South Dakota. We may be open for business, but we are absolutely not for sale. After the November election, and we voted in President Donald Trump for his next term, many more things happened. We got to the leadership elections in Pierre, and we took over the House and the Senate for pro-private property rights, constitutional conservatives that led to both House and Senate. They called it an avalanche, they called it a hurricane, whatever they called it. I was like, well, whatever, keep watching because we're just getting started. Then we had our GOP elections, and 2 years ago, my dear friend Jim Eschenbaum wasn't even allowed to go to the meeting, and he is now your GOP chairman. And that was after successfully leading the RL 21 fight, which effectively told every politician in the state of South Dakota that we, the people, expect you to actually represent our interests in the state of South Dakota. And we, the Republican Party, actually expect our politicians to, I don't know, follow the party platform. So many victories have happened, it's hard to even stack them up and add them up. Yeah, are we tired of winning yet? Then the 100th legislative session happened. And there was a bill called HB 1052 that was introduced by my dear friends, Representative Karla Lems and Senator Mark Lapka. That bill was simple. In 30 words or less, it said what needed to be done, while the gun was pointed at the heads of so many South Dakotans who for 4 years their lives have been put on hold. The financial toll, the emotional toll, the ongoing stress. Heck, you guys probably didn't even know I have a family because I was always at pipeline meetings, but my husband Tyler is here tonight. Can you guys please give him a round of applause? For so many families just like mine, that's what it looked like. One member of the family going to pipeline meetings and one member of the family taking care of the ranch and the kids back home. And so I couldn't do what I was doing without Tyler being my backbone and my support in that. So we had a very important bill that was clean. It was simple. It said simply, no eminent domain for carbon oxide pipelines. And I'm going to have these two come and talk about it here in just a moment. But the legislative session happened. There were 1,000 different ways that bill should have died. There were 1 million attempts. Tina's laughing because she knows there were saboteurs within our party. There were people who absolutely did not want that bill to get to the governor's desk. But some very savvy, very smart, very clear-headed legislators said, no, this bill is going to get to the governor's desk. HB 1052 is the right thing to do, and it will absolutely have its day. And I don't know about you, but when we finally got that signature, the feeling of overwhelm and relief and joy and also sadness that it even had to get to this point was quite overwhelming. But the message is clear now. I think they think now that 1052 has been passed that the landowners will just go away. But my message is that we are just getting started. We have much work to do. I'm pretty sure there was a group here last week that tried to tell you they're going to speak for you and that nature is nonpartisan and that conservationism is a really cool thing and they can wrap it any way they want. They can put a bow on it, but it is the Green New Deal that they're pushing for, and I think South Dakota has been pretty clear on that. Not here, not today, not tomorrow, no way. A few things I've learned from this fight. Number one, I want to formally thank Summit Carbon Solutions because without them spending gobs and gobs of money, I wouldn't have found dear friends, patriots, and people who love this country, have great devotion to their faith, and are willing to get off the bench and fight for the government that actually serves the people. So thank you, Summit Carbon Solutions. I also want to thank them because without their help, we wouldn't be overturning the entire government in the state of South Dakota, where no longer can they write a blank check for their economic development programs and say, we're going to enrich our friends and it's not going to benefit you at all, but that's what we're going to do here and you better like it. Those days are also done. So what happens next? I believe we have a lot of work ahead of us. I believe if we're going to maintain this momentum in every corner of the state, from east to west, north to south, we have to recognize that if we do want a government that serves the people, that's for the people, we have to show up. And what I learned during this pipeline fight is that everyone has time, talent, and treasures to give. It all looks a little bit different. How you serve might look different than how I serve. Some can write, some are organized, some can speak well, some can pass out signs and buttons and make t-shirts, some can do social media. But if we all do a little bit of something, if we all are committed to making sure that South Dakota remains South Dakota, and that when we say under God, the people rule, we can actually believe that that is true, it's going to take each and every one of us to being committed to continue the work that's been started and understand that the second we get apathetic is the second they pounce. And I'm telling you today, as long as I have air in my lungs and a heart that beats, I am not going back to that feeling that we felt the last 3 years in Pierre. We are not going back. So I've talked long enough myself. I really I'm so honored to have two special guests with me who came from the eastern side of the state. First, I want to introduce Representative Karla Lems up to the stage with me. She is the first female Speaker Pro Tem in the state of South Dakota. Give her a round of applause. She told me today, Karla has become a dear friend and confidant and just a trusted individual in my life. I love her. We've been in the fight together for a long time. But she told me today, she said, Amanda, even when I was a little kid in elementary school, I never liked a bully. And if there's one person who can square up to a bully, it is Representative Karla Lems.
Yeah.
I also want to introduce my dear friend, freshman Senator Mark Lapka from Leola, South Dakota. Farmer, rancher, devoted husband and father, and if you heard his speech on the Senate floor talking about 1052, you know without a fraction of a doubt that that was God-inspired and it represented us all so well. Please give him a round of applause. That worked? Oh, okay. You think I know how to run a mic. So now that I have these two up here, because I really felt I cannot come to Western South Dakota and tell this story without my two dear friends here, I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about some of the ins and outs of the legislative session and really how did we get this bill to the finish line. So Karla, I guess to start, I know people know you as like you've been in this pipeline fight, but I'd love to hear and have you tell everybody, how did you get involved in politics? What inspired you to run in the first place?
Well, believe it or not, it's been reported in the press that I got involved in politics because of the CO2 pipeline, which is not true. But it was one of the first things that I had to tackle. But the reason that I got involved in politics, I was already involved somewhat with my county. I'm from Lincoln County, so I was involved in the GOP. I was doing all of those things. There was an empty seat in my district, and I had decided, I think the time is right that I need to run. And so it was around that time, the 2020 election had happened. I was very, very unhappy with what was going on in our federal government at that time. The elections looked weird to me, and we know now that they were. And so I was very concerned about that. And I remember I was on the Central Committee. And so I went to one of the Central Committee meetings, and I was very concerned. I had asked our leader at the time, who happened to be Dan Lederman, who later on we found was involved with Summit Carbon Solutions. But he was the chair of the GOP at the time in the state. And I said, what are we going to do to address at the Central Committee meeting the things that are happening in our federal government? January 6th had just happened, and it was very concerning to me. And I just saw this turn that our country was taking, and I'm like, this is not okay. And I was just basically told, we're not going to worry about it. We support our Republicans that are in office, and basically we don't ask any questions. And I was like, okay, so can you be a card-carrying communist but yet be registered Republican and we're not going to ask any questions? That doesn't make any sense. We should all be holding each other accountable, whether it's in our party, whether it's in our church, whether it's in our families. We need to be who we say we are. And if we're not, we need to be able to call people out because that's how we get duped. And so I ended up running. I remember at our Lincoln Day dinner in Lincoln County, it was a fun time. It was like this. And I got up and I announced that I was going to run, and I just had this heaviness that I felt at the time. And I was like, I got up and I said, we're having a good time here tonight and everything, but I feel like, guys, we better say what is really going on. We are facing, I believe, an onslaught of communism in our country. This is just beneath the surface, and we're all here partying. We better be serious about turning this thing around. And so, I said, I'm going to run. And so I did, and I got in. Long story short, I ended up my very first year here. We had 2 pipelines coming through our property. And I got the paperwork on my desk. It was about that same time, and I'm like, well, I looked at it. Guess what? I'm not against pipelines. I'm not against economic development. I'm not against ethanol. All the pictures, all the things that they say about us that are not true. And I just want to make sure that we say that to everybody. But I looked at that And I said, you know, this is the Green New Deal. Literally, I remember sitting at my desk thinking that. I set it aside and I thought, well, I'm not interested in that. I don't want to participate in that. And yet here it came. And so I remember my first year, I was on the floor of the House, and who would come up and talk to me but this gentleman over here. He was not a senator at the time. He was a farmer from McPherson County. And he's like, would you be interested? Could you run a bill for us for eminent domain for this pipeline, saying, you know, no eminent domain? And I'm like, I am a freshman legislator. That is a huge, heavy lift. All these people depending on me. I'm like, I'll do it, but I'm like, I don't really know what I'm doing. And so I want to give a shout out to the people in the room that have helped with this effort. I mean, literally, we got township people together, we got county people, we got you know, like Amanda said, we were meeting in all kinds of areas. But that very first year I ran the bill, 1133, it was basically very much the same bill that we ran this year. And it obviously didn't get through. We did get it through the House, which was amazing. But it died in the Senate committee. And like Amanda said, I started to recognize as a new legislator, there are things happening here that are not right. Okay, we roll out the red carpet for the lobbyists, for the blue badges, we call them, and yet the people come to testify and they are looked down at. That is wrong, wrong, wrong. And I saw it on so many levels, and the people that started paying attention, I think that, like you said, Summit Carbon Solutions, we should thank them because they woke up a sleeping giant. And the people that came on behalf of the pipeline started to pay attention to all of these other things, election integrity and transparency in government, and you know, the bigness of government programs and all of these things. And they started to question what's going on, and the attitudes of legislators that had been in there for a long time that were wrong. And so we started to see those things, and there started to become a movement because the people started paying attention. And then we had media groups started putting things out, and we started the film rolling, and the other people in the state started watching that. And so again, and I want to say thank you to Representative Scott Odenbach. I want to say thank you to Representative Julie Auk, Tina Mullally, Julie Freimel. I mean, I don't want to miss anybody, but so many of you were so into Heidi Engelhardt, Kelly Brack, anyways, Taffy, on and on and on throughout the room. But that bill failed the first time around. So then that summer is when we started to see Summit really on the move. And that's when we heard about Jared Bosley, and you heard about, and I'll let Mark talk more about that, but that is when we started to network and say, we've got to start getting our townships involved. We had a meeting down in Canton with that. But what really rolled it out was when this happened with Jared, we made a trip up to Leola, South Dakota, and that was because we wanted to lay eyes on what was really going on. And we thought outside of the box. This is not the normal things that legislators do, but we were like, let's do a road trip. I called Representative John Hanson. I'm like, you want to go on a road trip? He's like, let's go. And so we went up there. We met at the courthouse steps, and we had a rally, one of our first rallies. Mark's like, I'm never doing another rally. We've done that over and over and over. But again, fast forward, but what happened was, again, we woke up a sleeping giant, and we were able to then fast forward to today. We are able to stand here and say we got 1052 across the finish line, but it was because of the hard work of South Dakotans in every single county in the state. This was not just one organization doing this. There were multiple organizations working in tandem, and also at the same time running campaigns trying to get new legislators in place so that we could get leadership this year and have enough of a majority that we could get some of these things across the finish line. And I could go on and on and on, and I better stop. But so I'm going to turn this over back to Amanda. But hey, we're here today and we're not going anywhere.
That's right. Oh, Karla's totally right. As you look across the room, you can start counting the faces, and it literally is so many people. It took all of us to do the heavy lifting. So it's it's hard to even describe how big this movement has gotten. The papers have called us a small vocal minority. I think they figured out that's a lie. They've tried to put us in a box that we're certain associations or we're activist groups or anything that they could possibly do to paint us in a certain light. But when it is everyday citizens from all walks of life coming to here, South Dakota, and saying this is the right thing to do for the people, it became so hard to ignore. Mark, I want to talk to you. I want to go back to the beginning. You know, Karla mentioned that first meeting in Leola and Jared Bosley, and I think we always assume that people know Jared's story, but really, Jared's story was the catalyst for much of this, and it's so terrible it had to get that bad to start this. But can you bring us back to where it began for you and Jared and so many others?
Well, thank you, Amanda. I'd be glad to. I'll apologize. I'm going to have to yell at the gal that sold me this jacket. She said it'd be cool. It's not. And I'm just, you know, I feel so at home here because after the legislative session, I've been back home wearing my Carhartts outside, chasing cows, building fence, working on machinery, because that's my passion. That's what I love to do. But I know Karla said it wasn't the carbon pipeline that got her into politics, and unfortunately, it was for me. The only thing that I ever wanted to do in my life was be left alone and farm. We have the freedoms and the liberties per the Constitution that allow us to do that. And that's how I spent the majority of my adult life. Then all of a sudden, this project showed up, and we found out that the private property rights that we believed that we had in the state of South Dakota were not in fact there. And so it was because of that that I figured out that you may not want to have anything to do with politics, but politics has everything to do with you. And if you weren't going to get involved, you weren't ultimately going to be able to have the freedom to decide what to do. And so we began on a small level. It started amongst all the neighbors in the area. We started talking to each other because these land agents would show up and talk about how 80% of your neighbors have signed up.
Oh, really?
Exactly. And that was never the case. Small towns, small areas, rural towns like ours, people can communicate and most of the time tell you the truth. So we figured it out. We smelled a rat. So then we started going to, holding community meetings, getting more awareness about it. And we thought, well, this will be over in 6 months. I can go back to what I'm doing. Found out that wasn't the case. Court cases started showing up. The incidences with the surveying per the Jared Bosley incident, which I was there that day. All the stories that you've heard are in fact true. I was there. I lived it. We end up in court. We figured, well, you know, they're going to be able to do something here. Well, that's when a lot of us lost faith in the court system. And then they started showing up with surveyors with guns, armed guards. And then all of a sudden, here we are looking at our own property that we're not allowed to go on to. And when you talk to the sheriffs, they say that, well, we're here to protect the company from you. On your own property. Then they started handing out restraining orders that you couldn't even go out there and do anything. Well, that didn't sit very well. So the only thing that we came to the conclusion is, if you don't like the law, you're going to have to change it. And so that's what we began the process. Karla was a great person to work with, and she stuck out through so many times all by herself that I can't believe the courage that Karla has. And could you please give her a round of applause? That was year one. Year two, we went back at it. Representative Odenbach was such a great help. Senator Fry-Mueller was a great help. I know I'm forgetting a few in these room, but we were unsuccessful again. But the great thing, the way that the state came together with RL 21, that's what pushed things over the top. That's what got people to the polls that cared about the state of South Dakota, to the primary, got the folks elected, and got this done.
That's right.
And per Amanda's comments, you know, I really feel that this is a building block. We're just beginning. We're just starting from here, because I don't ever want to go back to the way things were. We became complacent. We thought everything would be okay. Don't get involved. You're only going to get yourself in trouble if you put yourself out there. Well, I think that level of comfort shouldn't be done anymore, and we should always stay vigilant in the state of South Dakota because it is the best state in the United States of America.
You know, I want to talk a little bit about the committee hearings. So one of the things that really stuck out to me is it never really was an association that was speaking on behalf of these bills. It was legislators and it was landowners and South Dakota citizens. I think it was really special to have Speaker of the House John Hanson there testifying on this bill. A lot of people don't realize, but John was a part of this since the very beginning. I had invited him out as well because he's been such a critical part of this fight, but he's at a fundraiser at his kid's school tonight, and I know dad of 6 kids, that's really important as well. And so we miss him tonight because really I want to highlight some of the work that John has done. He was at that very first Leola meeting. He debated another carbon pipeline company. You guys might remember Navigator. He debated Navigator and they packed up their bags and left. He whooped their butts that day, so that was pretty awesome. And then to have the Speaker of the House come and testify on 1052 and say, this bill is the right thing to do. It was a pretty powerful moment in this fight. Karla, could you talk a little bit about just the committee hearings, you know, and on the House side, how it went from the committee to the House, what the votes were, because it was probably the easiest lift of the whole journey of this bill, but there was still definitely a lot that went on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, what happened was, okay, so in 2022 or 2023, we had HB 1133, and that did pass the House at that time. Then it failed over in the Senate. Then in 2024, we had HB 1219, which then Representative John Hanson actually carried that bill, very similar bill again to this, and then actually that failed. I don't even think we got it down to the floor. I think we tried to smoke it out. So then this year, what was the difference with this year? This year was, we got all these new legislators, right? And the other side recognized what happened. And so they were put on notice that if you don't get on board with this, we're going to do the same thing to you. And so that's what happened. And so, yeah, we had it came out of committee, I believe, 10 to 3 in the House. And so we got it very easily down to the floor. Now, I will just point out with new leadership, what happens with that is we are able to then set up the committees, okay? And so the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader basically kind of work together and get those committees set up. Am I saying that right, Scott? Or you do? Okay. Anyway, they work together, get those committees set up, and then they appoint the chairs of those committees. So a lot different makeup than what we had in the past. And I believe we tried as leadership to have a very fair process. We tried to have people come into committees and be able to testify, give both sides a chance to weigh in, give them equal time. I think we had a fairer process than what I have seen in the last 2 years. And so that is a very key part of this. So you not only need the numbers, but you need the committees to get them out. So we got it out of committee 10 to 3. It went down to the House floor 1052. And we had Representative Tony Randolph. I'm not going to let him live this down. He was gone that day. And so we had 49 yes votes and I believe 19 no votes. And so we were missing Tony. If we would have had Tony, we would have had 50. So an overwhelming majority, that 1052 passed the House that day.
So when it got over to the Senate side, it got a little dicier. It wasn't a guaranteed slam dunk win. So Senator Lapka, can you tell us a little bit about kind of the dynamics going on the Senate side?
Well, the Senate was always the greatest area of concern because that was always the iron curtain, the brick wall, if you will, the last several years. We were never able to get past their committees, and we were never able to have a fair hearing on the floor, and never knew where a lot of our senators stood. And so due to the influx of new legislators this year, we ended up with a glut of bills coming in later than normal, and so it held up the committee hearing for 1052 as that was a House bill. And each chamber needs to push out the bills that originate within their own chamber by a certain date that's referred to crossover day. So when that committee was coming up after crossover day, we really geared up because we knew that this was the one hurdle that we've never been able to jump, and we have to succeed here. Every day could have been the last. But as long as you're still in the game, you still have a chance to win the war. And so we had a great showing in the Senate State Affairs Committee. We were able to successfully come out of there with 1052 out of 7-2 vote. But what the most remarkable thing was, over 150 landowner South Dakota citizens showed up, and we had 4 people deliver very short, succinct testimony, and each one of those landowners got up and told them where they were from, what their name was, and to vote yes in the form of a Me Too. And it probably was one of the most humbling experiences of my entire life, to see people participate in their government because it is their government. And we successfully came out of the committee, and then we went on to the Senate floor. In the Senate floor, you know, you never know. I've learned one thing: you never know what's going to happen for sure until it happens. Had a good feeling about it, but the lobbyists were just covering the place thick. But many landowners showed up to talk to their own senators and other senators on their own behalf, which was just great. It was a great debate on the floor. The arguments were so strong because we're not against economic development. We're not against projects. We're pro-Constitution. That's what we are. And if we don't have that held, none of that other stuff means anything. And so it was just a real great moment that we came off of the Senate floor by a vote of 23-12. And then you start worrying about, is the governor going to sign it or not? And it was one of the proudest moments in my life that 2 days later, our governor, Larry Roden, did in fact sign it. 1052 is now law. We have way better landowner protections than the state ever has before.
I'd like to add to Mark's comments on that Senate committee. It was 31 minutes of Me Too's that were on the floor that day. And you had people crying as they walked up to the microphone. And it was a proud moment. It was a humbling moment. It was much needed for the landowners. Like, they needed this relief. It was time. It was the right thing to do. But the other thing that struck me through my tears that day was this never should happen in the state of South Dakota, where citizens for 4 years have to go and beg for rights that are already theirs. It's unacceptable. You know, I've noticed some commentary from the cheap seats and other legislators who aren't too happy with the session. And they think that nothing got done that was of consequence, and they're trying to rewrite the narrative. But really, I would actually argue not only was 1052 quite a poignant end to the session, but the entire nation is watching what's happened in South Dakota. This isn't just here. I've gotten emails from New Mexico, Oklahoma, Missouri, Minnesota, all across the country where there's land grabs happening, just like we've experienced in South Dakota from private companies. And South Dakota now serves as a beacon of hope for other places. We are leading the nation. South Dakota is the place where we take our stand and say freedom lives here. It lives here. Now, I will say, in addition to that victory, there were some bills that our great legislators were able to defeat that were absolutely betrayals to the South Dakota citizens. 2 bills, and I guess Karla, I can take whichever bill she wants to talk about, or she can talk both. But there were 2 bills that were so egregious, I couldn't even believe we were discussing them. One was a mini SB 201. That was HB 1261, is that correct? Yep. Carried by Drew Peterson and Sidney Davis. That bill basically read just like 201, where it absolutely would have changed the rules in the middle of the game, and I'll let Karla talk a little bit about the nuances of that bill and how it was quickly defeated in the legislature. The second bill that was quite offensive to me was SB 198, which was also handedly defeated. That was carried by Senator Melhoff, who thought instead of a compromise where 1052 was you can say yes to a project and you can sign an easement and you can do business with good faith negotiations, or you can simply say no thank you, go around, I don't want to participate in your Green New Deal. That was the compromise bill. His idea of a compromise is a landowner facing condemnation should be forced into mediation and have to talk with their bully and their oppressor with the gun on their hip. Give me a break. So Karla, I want you to talk about those bills, what it means to kind of that you were able to go on kind of the defense and kind of block some of these terrible things from coming to the South Dakota citizens.
Well, I'll talk about SB 198 a little bit. So that bill was basically, like Amanda said, that was going to force, the very first time I read it, what I took out of it was this is going to force a landowner who does not want to mediate. It's going to basically force them into mediation. Now, if you will not mediate, they're able to take that to the court when they go to court and say, well, we tried X, Y, and Z. It was this date. We made this phone call. We showed up at their door, and they wouldn't meet with us. And so they were able to then bring that to the court and say, woe is us. We tried, and now this is, in my eyes, this is how the judge would say, well, why are you wasting my time? You didn't even take time to meet with this company. And that was thrown out at us time and time again. Well, you didn't even meet with Summit. I shouldn't have to meet with Summit or Navigator if I do not want to. And if I say, no, thank you, they should turn around and go back to their truck. So that was SB 198. Now that did get out of the Senate. It came over to our House State Affairs Committee, and Representative Odenbach is on that with me. And we were able to, we killed that bill in the House State Affairs Committee, and then we turned around and we hog-housed the bill. And if any of you know what a hog-house is, you basically wipe the bill clean. And what we were able to do, that was before 1052 was heard in the Senate. So Speaker John Hanson said, you know what, why don't we just put this in our back pocket, and we're just going to take the language of 1052 and put it into SB 198. So if you're following me, we had a card up our sleeve, if you will, the ace up our sleeve. And so if 1052 would have failed in the Senate, we would have been able to bring it back to the House where it had already passed. And so that's what we were able to do with Senate Bill 198. But it was an egregious bill. I thought it was a stick in the eye, again, to the landowners. And I am very happy to say that that went down.
And that bill, I just got to say, it was amazing to watch Speaker Hansen at work. His experience as an elected official, as a servant leader, his wisdom from just years and years of being in peer allowed him to know the technical ability for him to be able to do that. And to be able to have that extra bullet in the chamber on 1052, if you can kill it over here, well, don't worry, we have it over here. It will have its day. That was a powerful, strong sign of support to the landowners, saying when he spoke in January at our landowner rally and he said, this is done. This is not going to happen anymore in the state of South Dakota. He meant it. And he followed through it with some brilliant legislation and some brilliant leadership that I think we are very, very blessed to have in the state of South Dakota. So Mark, do you want to talk a little bit about 1261 as well?
Yeah, 1261 was another very unfriendly bill for property rights in the state of South Dakota. 1261 was, in essence, a miniature 201, SB 201. What 1261 would have done is it would have given counties the authority to preempt municipalities and townships' zoning ordinances. The way that they were going to accomplish that is it was going to give the county the ability to issue a conditional use permit that would have allowed any infrastructure to be constructed and operated within public right-of-way. And now, having been a large part and researched pipeline language for the last several years, the two words that really jumped out at me in that bill was to construct and operate. That's common vernacular when it's pertaining to pipelines. And so odds are what was going on, that was a veiled attempt to get this carbon pipeline put in the right-of-ways in the state of South Dakota via only having to communicate with the county commissions. Divide and conquer, make few of them. It would have made for an easier way. And so, unfortunately, that bill did pass out of our House of Representatives by a very narrow margin. Unfortunately, it did pass out of committee in the Senate, but we were fortunate to defeat it, and I believe it was up by a vote of about 21-14 in the Senate, and so that went away. Because that's the other side of the coin. Not only do we need to enact good legislation that is going to protect property rights in the citizens of South Dakota, we have to stay vigilant and make sure that bad stuff does not come through and be to our detriment.
One thing that I think we have learned with all of this is we know that these things have been in the works for years. They have been laying the foundation, bill upon bill, law upon law, that many sitting in the room would not have known. You're just looking at this right here, just like 1261. That might have made sense for maybe a dairy or something like that. But when you look at the bigger picture, it's like, what are they really trying to accomplish with this bill? And that's why we as legislators always have to be on guard, not just thinking of the specific situation that they might be saying they need this for, but they absolutely have been doing that. They did it in Iowa, and they did it in North Dakota as well.
And that's a perfect segue, Karla, and I'll ask Mark, I guess. This one is, what are the lessons learned? Because this is happening all across the state of South Dakota. There's corridors coming. There's all of these projects that are coming. The devil's often in the details on these easements. We see a government that has, for the last 4 years at least, been kind of out of control. I've got friends in western South Dakota, Charles and Heather Maud, that are experiencing that right now with the heavy hand of government coming down on a hard-working ranching couple that's homeschooling their kids, trying to do the right thing, and over a fence line dispute, they're facing felony charges and an indictment. So there's one thing I've learned, is that for some reason, the government and the donor class, the billion-dollar donor class, really are interested in the Dakotas. They're really interested in what we have, which is the land, the natural resources. And if there's one thing I've learned, the South Dakota farmer and rancher is kind of in the way. And so what do we do to protect ourselves? Not that we're not open for business and we're not open for opportunities, but we want to pick and choose the opportunities that come onto our land and our properties and our backyards, because we too are business owners trying to build something and chase the American dream, not have it taken away from us by the donor class that comes in with the special interests and caters to the politicians. So the lessons that can be learned. What would you advise folks here in western South Dakota, in Belle Fourche, in Butte County? How do they organize? How do they work together? And how do they make sure that good things happen in their county and not bad?
The biggest thing is to come to the realization you can't accomplish anything by yourself. You need to communicate. I believe on some level in rural America, because it was evident back where I'm from, we'd begun to lose our sense of community to a degree. I remember as a kid going to town more. Well, it really seemed to change once the cell phones came in, and all of a sudden we started losing more farms, and consolidation was taking place. And I believe that was due to, again, government interference, subsidization, crop insurance. There was a lot fewer of us. Things became a lot more competitive. And if you weren't fighting to survive, you'd go away too. So I think that led to a bit of a degradation in our community, the sense of community in our small towns. And it wasn't until we had an issue like this come in that all went away. McPherson County was the first county in the entire nation to put a moratorium on carbon pipelines in the United States. I remember going to that meeting. It was on the 2nd of January of 2022. And I was nominated to be the spokesperson for it, but I couldn't accomplish anything on my own. There was over 100 landowners from McPherson County sitting there. That's pretty significant, as we only have a population of about 2,200 people. But it's been so humbling to see that we've all stuck together and still have. And I'm very confident that if we have another issue arise, we're probably not going to see anything near as bad happen. And so the best piece of advice that I can give you is reach out to your neighbors, communicate, talk about it. There are these issues that look to be coming into western South Dakota. And you have the opportunity to get ahead of it. We got caught flat-footed. And we're never going to be able to change that. But maybe we can communicate with you guys of looking out for it. But the best thing that I can say that works is stick together.
And I think it's really exciting to see that the heart of South Dakota is alive and well, and from townships and counties and the school boards, the involvement that we're seeing of everyday South Dakotans saying enough is enough. We're going to get involved. We're going to make our communities what we want to see and how we want to live. It's a really special thing. You know, there's much to celebrate. There's been many victories to talk about tonight. But I'm always looking ahead. We've talked a lot tonight how we're just getting started, how there's much work to do. And I'd love Karla to talk a little bit about what the next legislative session looks like and what your priorities are and what can we look forward to in the state of South Dakota.
Well, we have a lot to look forward to because we're leading. We're leading here in South Dakota. And you ask states around, like Amanda has said, we just had some people from South Dakota go to Washington, D.C. to lobby on behalf of some of these tax credits that are coming forward and that we think that DOJ should get rid of. And so they said, you can't believe how people treated us in Washington. It was like we were heroes coming from the state of South Dakota, and that's from Washington. So people are paying attention to us. We're going to continue to try to lead. I know as leadership is laying that out for us, like Speaker John Hanson, Representative Majority Leader Scott Odenbach. We continue to go forward. There are things, obviously we have the Property Tax Task Force. We know that something has to be done with property taxes. I know that. And one thing that I try to remind people is leadership this year, we just got in. Okay, so we are leading, we are doing things. I think we had a great session, but we know not enough was done with property taxes. And so I hate saying, we had the summer study last summer. I don't believe there was much really that got accomplished with that other than they studied it. But this property tax task force will be set up differently this summer. And one thing that I really emphasized in the state affairs when that bill came before us, I'm like, can we come out of this with a bill? We have got to have a bill, something that actually does substantial cuts for people. And so I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. I don't know if that's eliminating property taxes or if it's reducing them and however, but we have to have cuts with that. We have to cut. That's the second thing. Our government has gotten too big and we have to look to cut that. We also need, yes. So South Dakota DOJ, right? So that's being looked at. And also we need transparency in our government. I think every dollar should be accounted for. We should be able to see what all of these slush funds are that are here and there and everywhere. We have the future fund right now. I'll just pick on that a little bit. There was a bill this year to defund that did not go through. But we definitely need more oversight on things like that right now in that future fund, there's $100 million sitting in there. So we need to know where all of these things are. And I personally am on the Government Operations and Audit Committee. Our first meeting will be on Tuesday. I know Senator Tappy Howard and Representative Julie Auk are on that as well. They're in the room. And so we are going to be moving forward. And one thing that I'm going to continue to do is come to events like this and encourage all of you to get involved in your governments, whether that is in your township, in your county, in your library, in your school board, whatever it is, because that is how we win.
That's right. So there's so many things we could talk about. I know Senator Lapka was on appropriations. They're both on the prison task force. But we could go on and on, but I guess just to close the night, yes, I was going to, first of all, please give them a round of applause for being with us tonight, driving all this way. Yes. But I guess we could open it up for questions if you guys have, she's ready.
So if you could tell us a website that we can follow these bills so that we can listen
Yes, so you can go to sdlegislature.gov, and you can go, and there will be a button there that you click on for committees, and then you can go to that committee, and there will be an audio button. If you want to watch, like the House floor sessions, I believe that's on sd.net. Am I correct? Okay. And so yes, I would encourage you to do that. And if you ever want to testify on a bill, you let that chairperson know, and they will put you on the list. You have to let them know usually 24 hours in advance, but that is a great way. If the chair allows it for that committee, you can testify remotely, so you don't even have to come out. Yes?
Government being cut at the state level, at the county level. But as a politician, how do you look at your constituents in the eye, knowing that you have a lot of state workers, county workers in your district, and say, we're going to cut? How does that work?
That's tough.
Yeah, it is. But tell us.
You know, it's going to take an $800,000 a year budget for maintenance of roads. And that all comes from property taxes. My county hadn't purchased a new road maintainer for 15 years. They just did here a month ago. It cost $480,000. It's over 50% of the taxes for the road budget for 1 year. So what's going to get left unfixed? And it's a very difficult issue to navigate because inflation hasn't run its course to its full extent yet. That's the primary driver behind all of this. And when you get down to people's jobs or simple government practices of just maintaining the roads that we all use and need, it's difficult. I don't have all the answers for it. I wish I did. And then this would be a simple question to answer. And so everything is just going to have to be on the table, whether it's cuts, and unfortunately letting people go, I don't know. But some way, somehow, all I do know for sure is it's not working very good the way things are. And so I'm open to any and all suggestions.
South Dakota Doge.
South Dakota Doge, that's right, Tina. Yeah. Any other questions? Surely this sharp and savvy crowd has questions. Go ahead.
Would you guys be willing, East River, to help us, West River, with our plan of abolishing property taxes? The forums Mike and I have been putting on since April and May of last year, and then we've started doing them in February this year. And it's totally abolishing property taxes. And you know how we all joined together on RL 21 and all these, SB 201. We would love for us as a state to unite on that.
Well, I'm willing to look at any plan, you know, and so obviously we have to vet the plans. We have to see if they work, if they don't work, where the holes are, you know, what's the high points, all of those things. And again, like I said, we're going to have that property tax task force. I really do believe that there will be something that comes out of that. I'm expecting it. Right, Representative Obenbach? Isn't that what we're expecting? And I'm not saying that they're going to have the, you know, the answer. But I do believe we're going to have something better than what we got out of the session. And yes, maybe with that, we need to do something more. And so, but I totally am willing to look at any plan that anybody, and that's why I hope that the task force is going to be traveling, not just having these meetings in Pierre, that they would have them, because I think some of our best solutions come from the citizens coming to those kinds of things and hearing from them. Go ahead.
One of the thoughts in the task force that needs to be brought up is the fact that when video lottery came into our state, it was for our education. Mm-hmm. Let's take that money back and actually give it to education so that we can actually get relief from our property taxes. Because that's what it was sold for, and it's destroying our economy if we don't start doing something about cut spending in these schools.
And I will just say, we've said before, I mean, that is the elephant in the room, is education, that nobody wants to talk about, because obviously we all want our kids to have a good education. But that absolutely will have to be dug into during the summer task force and see what is this education formula and is it working? Obviously, we don't think it is.
And all the tax bills that was introduced this year, I was trying to watch them. And that's one problem with watching the bills, because the amendments and stuff happen so fast, you can't keep up with what's going on. But in those tax bills, pretty near all of them neglected ag land. They addressed the housing issue, but the ag land was left as it is. We have a big problem in western South Dakota with ag land taxes in the way they're administered and so forth. And I can show you some stuff on that, but how do we gotta protect ag. Ag's the number one thing in South Dakota, and cattle is the biggest part of ag. And out here in western South Dakota, we've lost most of our ag industry, and the dairies and the hogs and the sheep are about gone. Chad can elaborate on that too. But if we've lost our production, and yet our taxes have doubled, tripled, 10 times of what they were. And how do we adjust that?
So I was appointed to the property tax working group during the legislative session. I get you. I am a farmer and a rancher, and I've seen what the costs have done. And I went in there with a head of steam. How can we get property taxes lowered on ag land? Again, I'm more of an expert on ag land. Didn't realize to what degree that the owner-occupied taxes have done within the state of South Dakota. And I know that's a big issue here. And another part of the problem is we're so underrepresented as farmers and ranchers or agricultural people in the legislature. It's almost unbelievable. I know that dynamic has really shifted over the years. But in that committee, what I learned there was that over the last 5 years, the percentage of the total dollar amount that ag land puts forward for property taxes has steadily declined. Here several years back, they went to the production formula that includes anything from what the rent is, what the productivity of the soils are, and I'm sure you're well versed on what that is. 5 years ago, ag land was paying 27% of the total dollars in property taxes for the state. Today, it's down to 19%. Whereas owner-occupied was paying 36% 5 years ago. Currently, it's paying 47%. Well, I was savvy enough to know that I'm not really going to win many fights here when I'm all by myself trying to get those lowered. And so, because I completely agree, our house owners, our homeowners in the state have a really big problem at the time. The result of that was Senate Bill 216 that came out. That was the governor's bill. They're going to cap the growth at 3% per counties, which for rural counties like us, that doesn't amount to a hill of beans. Most of our counties won't realize over 1% of growth per year anyway. So it's a non-issue. But I sat down with LRC because I was skeptical of supporting that bill. I wanted to know what it would do to ag land. Are we just going to shift it all over onto ag land? Well, I sat down with LRC, and it's going to be very nominal as the formula wasn't messed with. Later in session, we had when the mill levies were set, those actually came down a little bit, but over in my area, we're still seeing it, just due to the valuations. You know, crop prices are down, cattle prices are high. We just had a land auction out there the other day that's land brought, what was it, $6,300. 2 years ago, it wouldn't have brought $3,800. You know, our own worst enemy is still ourselves to some degree, because we're willing to pump those valuations. But again, I feel that that's kind of a false valuation in the first place because they're propped up by government subsidies. So, you know, there's the property tax issue is such a difficult dynamic to navigate that it's going to take everything onto the table. Per Senator Freimueller's comment, I watched your guys' interview with Trent Luce. That was great, by the way. I know Trent well. He's a good friend. But I think everything's got to be looked at. But don't ever think I'll forget where I come from. And as long as I'm there, farmers and ranchers in South Dakota will have a good advocate.
Deb raised her hand first, then I can get to you. Go ahead, Deb.
500,000.
Yeah, I believe it was 300,000 previous to Senate Bill 216, and that increased it to 500,000 of owner-occupied homes.
The town that you're in right now, the median home value is over $300,000. And so my take on that bill is it's not really gonna help that many people. Because if in Belle Fourche where the median income is quite low, or I should say the starter home values are over $300,000. You've got that many more properties that are owner occupied that are over the $500,000 threshold. My husband and I are one of those. And right now, for us, I mean, I understand there's a lot going on with farm and ranch and things like that, but it is a hard pill to swallow when you look at your tax bill and you, like, we have 2.5 acres and we pay over $600 a month in taxes right now. And our mortgage payment, the tax and insurance is sitting like right at 50% of what the actual mortgage payment is. And so it's a really hard pill to swallow when you look at your little patch of land and you're paying a lot more in taxes than somebody who's got 10, 15, 20 times more land than you got. So I think you really need to address that because I feel like the governor's bill isn't going to do that much in reality because home values are just so high. Even in places like this where our economy is not booming.
And I agree with you. I don't believe that that bill is going to accomplish very much, but it was a starting point. And I'm confident in the task force that is going to be there this year, that those conversations are going to happen. Again, I'm not too sure what to do, but I do believe in bringing tax relief. Can we, is it realistic to probably eliminate property taxes 100%? I'm not convinced of that yet, but I do believe that we do need to relieve them in some manner as much as possible, because if you want to see our economies come back to life, give the people back their money. And then I think there'll be nothing but good. But thank you for your comments, because I am a property rights advocate first and foremost, because if you don't have that, what are you going to have? Hence, eminent domain threatening to take that away. Really, it isn't a lot different than taxing you out of your property either. And so that's one of the areas that I've really directed a lot of my concentration now that hopefully we can hold back on eminent domain in our area for a while. I know it's still an issue out here, and I'll be supportive of that. You've got some great senators out here. There's one of them, Kurt Boyd, right there, that are working on that. And so we got to figure something out, because again, what we're doing isn't working.
So I'm told we have to wrap up because we have more auction items as well. But one more question, because I know you in the back, or are you not? Do you want to ask your question? And we'll be around to visit too.
Because that is not South Dakota. So what kind of resources can Belle Fourche have? Because it is, they did come here on purpose for the center of the nation. What are the resources that Belle Fourche can have? Because they look at the little person and not being able to do anything about big corporations coming in and trying to do it.
So I'm glad you brought up that. So welcome to South Dakota. She's fled from Oregon, trying to get away from ugly, terrible politics and weird tree huggers that come to Belle Fourche and say, go outside and enjoy nature more. How ridiculous is that to come to South Dakota and say that? I've tried to visit with that organization. I'll be upfront with that. I asked them a few things. Who invited you? what organizations are you working with? They claim to be working with agricultural organizations. They won't tell me which ones. So which policies are you promoting? Well, we're building the ship at sea, and we don't know until we talk to farmers and ranchers. And then they also told me, we want to be your voice because you're underrepresented in Washington, D.C. And I said, do you know what's been going on in South Dakota? We have a pretty loud voice, and we didn't ask anybody to speak for us. Thank you very much. So I have questions about that organization. They're claiming it's bipartisan in nature, but it looks to me they would love conservative South Dakota to move awfully to the left and accept the Green New Deal. And so I appreciate that you recognize that. I guess we'll know them by their fruits. If they actually are wanting to do well for South Dakota, I guess show up and prove it then. Let's see. But to answer your question, I think, as far as what opportunities can be brought in, I'll just answer from my own experience. One of the things I do, I have a heart for kids and a heart for education. So my husband and I are foster and adoptive parents, and I'm a children's book author of 11 books. I still do believe very firmly that free enterprise and the free market is the best solutions that exist, not necessarily government. And so what I would love to see is community members bringing the best of their best into the schools in Belle Fourche. So like for me, I have children's books that teach kids all about agriculture and where their food comes from. They're geared for the classroom so teachers can actually use them. I had the great pleasure of doing a little tour of Western South Dakota here last fall with my daughter Scarlett and doing a 5-school classroom visit. But all the careers, all the industries, all the things that people do right here in this room could definitely be in the classroom. And I think those parents, those business owners talking to these kids and saying, here are the opportunities that exist in South Dakota. Here are the businesses that you could start. Here are the Main Street buildings that sit empty that would be really great for an entrepreneur to try something new. So I think a lot of change starts from parents getting involved and saying, what can we teach our kids and how can we implement those values that exist? But I don't know if Karla or Mark want to talk a little bit about the education piece or anything that Pierre is looking at during the legislative session as far as enhancing the educational experience for the kids.
Well, I would just say, we had the school choice bill this year. We had a couple different ones of those. There's lots of different ideas out there, but we do have, we have some great schools in South Dakota. We have some great public schools. We have some great public school teachers. But I don't know how many of you know that the 3rd largest school district in the state of South Dakota is homeschool. And so when you combine all of those together, there is a great homeschool group here in South Dakota. I know that some people want to see more in the way of school choice, like vouchers, things like that. I could see that coming around again. But again, I think the best thing to do, like Amanda said, is for parents to engage with their children. Make sure that you know what's going on in their school. Volunteer. Go in there, be on the school board, is it because we hear things, we hear things that are going on that are not okay in South Dakota in some schools. And so I guess that would be my piece of that. We also have Representative Odenbach, what is that scholarship fund that the state has called? Yes, Partners in Education. And so there is that too. I know there's been talk of doing more with that as well. And actually, if you want to talk to anybody about that afterwards, Representative Odenbach is a great resource. So, Mark, do you have anything?
Well, with that, we better wrap. He's telling me we got to wrap, but we will. Yeah, there's plenty of more things to buy on the auction, correct? Oh, I'm blaming it all on you. But thank you guys so much. I am so thrilled and honored to have been invited to speak out here tonight. I know this was just an amazing event, full crowd. Thank you for your support. And let's continue to fight for the government that's for the people, by the people, transparent to the people, so that in South Dakota we continue to say, under God, the people rule. God bless.